these documents were addressed to the United Nations, and my goal was to get them to the United Nations. And after several efforts as to the best way to take them to the UN, I finally got a meeting with the person, American government, American government man who worked at the United Nations on human rights. His name was Guy Wiggins. So after a lot of different efforts, I went to see Guy Wiggins and showed him the documents, and he explained to me, he said, you know, Ray, the Soviet Union has veto power, so this won't go nowhere in the United Nations. And it was his guy's suggestion. He liked what we were trying to do, and he said, why don't we go to Washington? Would you like some help? Maybe I could introduce you to some congressman. So the next step was to go to Washington with the documents. And one of the first congressmen we met, he had been a Baptist minister in San Antonio, and so he sat down and quietly listened, and again he explained, you know, Ray, to get this through the United States Congress, there's not really a chance that that could be done. And again, I said, well, we can pray. I believe in the power of prayer. And so he said, okay, if you would write out what you think should be in a bill to the United States Congress condemning the Soviet Union for the treatment like pastors like Georgie Vins, then we can introduce it. Nothing would happen, I don't think, but it would be on the record. So Guy Wiggins and I left his office and sat down in the back of a brown envelope. Guy helped me write out what would be like the wording of a bill for the United States Congress condemning the Soviet Union, and so we gave it to the congressman, and left it at that. And a few weeks later, I got a call from the congressman's office, and he said, Ray, I don't know what you're doing, but we have so many congressmen that want to co-sponsor this bill. Can you organize Foreign Relations Committee hearings? Now, I had to find out what a Foreign Relations Committee hearing was. It meant that we had to bring in witnesses of people who had suffered and were pastors who were persecuted in Russia. And with some research, I found two living in Germany. One was called Janis Smits, and the other was a man from the pastor from Ukraine, and some other pastors, but we got two who could go to the United States Foreign Relations Committee and witness. And to my surprise, and joy, they said if I could bring these people and some others, we could have a Foreign Relations Committee hearings about the bill. And it wasn't easy because, first of all, then unfortunately, I was admitted to hospital for a gallstone operation suddenly, and was time to go when I got out of the hospital, and it was my responsibility to get the fare for Janis Mitz and David Klassen, and I didn't have the fare. And I thought, well, if I went via Phoenix, I was in a very cheap ticket, maybe I could raise the fare in Phoenix. I failed to be able to raise the fare, and the next stop was Chicago, and I made a call to a friend who was a pastor. The pastor was not in, but I explained to the secretary of the church, and she said, well, Ray, I'll just go ahead and send the tickets. Can you give me the information? And this was late at night, the night before they were supposed to fly, and the tickets were telex right through to the airport in, I think it was Dusseldorf, where the two men were flying. And next day, I went and met them at the airport and brought them to their hotel. And the day after, the Foreign Relations Committee hearings took place. I was surprised. It was packed with all kinds of important people, and then it was moved on from the Foreign Relations Committee hearings, and we heard that, I think, pretty much the whole Congress nearly had voted to pass this bill on to the United States Senate. It went to the Senate, and it was there, and it was during the final days of the Ford administration, and nothing much was passing in the Senate, but Senator Humphreys and Senator Jackson, known as Scoop Jackson, they called me to say, Ray, don't worry, we will get this passed before midnight. And before midnight, at midnight, that Senate was ending, and if it didn't pass, we had to start all over again. So the last item on business of the Ford administration, they passed the bill in the Senate. It was unanimous, and that bill paved the way for many, many things to happen.